And can I just have a little rant here? YouTubers, this is not a micrometer. This is a vernier caliper. Please stop calling it a micrometer. Hello again YouTube. Well, a little bit more Trek Domane content for you. So this is the bike that I've recently recommissioned. Now my weight is at a stage where I don't think I'm going to snap the frame every time I throw a leg over it. But the bike, since I've started riding it again, an old problem has reared its ugly head. And that problem is related to the bottom bracket. So this frame comes with the Trek BB90 bottom bracket in it, and that was not their finest hour. It was, frankly, a terrible piece of design. The bearings in this bike, since the first year of ownership, have been a service item. In fact, I have changed bearings in this more frequently than I've changed brake pads. That'll tell you something. And the thing about this design is, if you don't catch the bearings soon enough, they can do damage to the frame. And hey, guess what's happened? Yep, I've got some frame damage, and until I found the solution that I'm going to talk about in this video, I honestly thought this frame could be scrap. But anyway, let me get on with talking about what the problem is, what I found and what I did. So here's what the problem looks like. I've got relatively fresh bearings in this bottom bracket, and I don't know if you can see that, but I've tightened the hell out of the preload cap. Preload cap is a lot tighter than it technically should be, and even with that preload cap tightened stupidly tight, there is still a hell of a lot of play in those cranks, and let me show you why that is. Okay, so this BB90 bottom bracket is a press fit standard, so obviously the bearings need to be pressed in. If you're familiar with press-in bearings, you'll know that they usually take a reasonable amount of force to install and remove. So the first thing I'm taking off there is a little rubber spacer. The bearings that go into the bike here on this BB90 design, I found they come in a couple of flavours. One you get with this kind of rubber seal, which I think was Trek's attempt to make the bearings seal a little bit better. But you get another one with a top hat. Let me see if I've got one of those. Okay, so this is the other type of bearing that you generally get with these. Let me get it out. This one's a little bit shot, but arguably should still have some life left in it. So the other type of bearing that you get for this BB90 has that plastic top hat pre-installed. So basically that acts as a spacer and a seal on the bearing, or is meant to act as a spacer and seal on the bearing. So I'm just going to take the crankset out, and then I think the problem will be evident. Did you catch that? Literally. Right, so if you're familiar with press fit bottom bearings, they generally are a slightly tighter fit than that, and I'll show you the reason that they're not. And just to help reinforce my point, the drive side bearing has actually come out still attached to the cranks. So you can see these are a real sloppy fit in the frame. So let me show you a little bit more detail about what's going on in the frame. So Trek, in their infinite wisdom, decided that the bearings should just press directly into the frame without any supporting cups pressed in. So if you're familiar with most bottom bracket designs, press-in bottom bracket designs, you've got a cup that's pressed into the frame, bearing presses into the cup. Anything goes wrong with one of those two, they're both removable and replaceable. With this system, if you get a bearing that starts to bind, and they bind really easily. If you get a bearing that starts to bind in there, there is a possibility that the bearing will spin. So the inner race binds to the outer race, the two spin together, and then you get some erosion actually of the carbon in the frame. I guess it's probably more an erosion of the epoxy, but you can see it going on just down here, where I've had a bearing in there beyond its useful life. Bearing has seized and spun, and it's taken a little bit of carbon off the frame. Now, the consequence of that, let me get my vernier and show you. So, more or less vertically, we are at, don't know if you can see that, 3691, 36.91 on the vernier there. Okay, horizontally, 37.01. So you can see that what's happened there, and you've got to remember this is not a precision vernier. This is just a cheap Amazon one, but with a more precision tool, you'd be able to better demonstrate that that hole is now slightly oval. So, having found this, I thought the frame could be a write-off. Enduro do make an oversized bearing. I think Trek, actually, because they were aware of the problem they'd created, they do make an oversized bearing. But let's be honest, once you've got erosion there, or erosion at any part of this bearing face, you're fighting a losing battle as soon as you start putting something bigger in there. So the solution I came up with is this. So what I have here is a complete replacement bottom bracket assembly made by Token, and this is their Token Ninja. If you're working on a BB90 or BB95 bottom bracket frame, you want the BB3724. And the beauty of this is it is a completely integrated assembly that's going to screw into the frame. Even better, the bearings come pre-installed into the bottom bracket, and the cups are integrated, all part of one screw together assembly. So when we put this in the frame, and try not to cross thread it, fine thread, there you go. Right, so when we put that in the frame, screw it together, if you imagine those cups are going to go in where the previous bearings were, and the fact that we've got a little bit of play on the frame doesn't matter, because these cups are slightly, I think, oversized compared to the usual size of the bearing. Plus you're also supporting the cup against the outside of the frame, and you're screwing the whole thing together, and that makes a really nice tight assembly. So to install this, you are going to need this special tool, because the way this works is that special tool is going to fit into the bottom bracket and just give you a nice solid drive to drive it into the frame. Special tool was just under 30 quid. Bracket was just under 50 quid. I think with delivery I was in for about £88 for these two together. That's a lot of money for a bottom bracket, but from my perspective, if it saves my lovely old Trek Domane 4.5 frame, because it's unrideable at the moment, with that, even with just that few thou of play in the bearings that I've got on there at the moment, it's really unrideable. As you start putting the power down on a hill or something like that, it's banging and creaking, and you know that those bearings are just doing more and more damage to the frame. So if this not only saves the frame but protects the frame, that to me is 80 quid well spent, because 80 quid, what's that, a set of tyres? And of course, you know, I've always got the tool if I want to remove this bottom bracket, which I probably will at some point in the future. Also, another nice thing about this is, because these bearings are pressed into the cups in the bottom bracket, they should be replaceable themselves. Now Token, I don't think would advocate you removing the bearings from these cups, But I do have other videos on my channel where I've removed bearings from other cups and successfully replaced them, and I don't think these would be any different. Plus, I've treated myself to a decent bearing puller, which means I wouldn't do any damage to the cups as I pull them out now. So, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take the old bottom bracket out of the bike, or the remnants of the old bottom bracket out of the bike, get everything lovely and clean and ready to accept this. So the first job is to get the old remnants of the bottom bracket out of the frame there. Basically 2 plastic halves, 2 plastic sleeves, one fits inside the other and they push into the frame. So there they are. They are now scrap and are going to be replaced by that lovely alloy token bottom bracket. Now I gave everything a really good clean just to make sure that when I insert that new assembly that it goes in cleanly and it isn't grating against any bits of crap left in the frame there. Take the new bottom bracket assembly, and the instructions say to grease it up before you put it in. So I gave it quite a liberal coating of decent waterproof grease there, which feels like sacrilege because it looks like such a lovely thing. Now the drive side goes in first. The drive side is the side with the thread on it. Then what you do is you just screw each half into each other and tighten them up basically until they just touch the frame. With the bottom bracket loosely installed, you then just want to snug it down and then finally torque it up with a torque wrench. Now they recommend 25 to 30 Newton meters for this. I used my old 1/2 inch torque wrench and torqued it to 30 Newton meters. Now I did find that I had to gradually tighten each side down just to get the cups to bind on each other and into the frame. Before you put your crankset in, on a road crankset you're going to need the 1.2mm spacer on each side. This comes with the kit, and there's an additional 0.5mm spacer that you'll use if you're fitting it to a mountain bike. On goes the crank arm, and as soon as this is done I'll be able to give it the necessary spin test. Top tip: if you're using a torque wrench, the way that these are designed is the torque measurement is between where you're meant to hold it and the spindle end there. Don't hold your torque wrench there and expect that you're going to get the same torque reading out of it, because if you hold it there you're actually altering the length of the lever and consequently the amount of torque you're applying. So do hold it where it was designed to be held. John Cadogan, autoexpert.com.au to thank for that top tip. So with the cranks installed, I was able to just check the play in them, and there's absolutely no play. It is rock solid. After that, I gave it the obligatory but not required and fairly useless spin test that everybody does when they install a new bottom bracket. And seriously, look at that, buttery smooth. So there you go, crisis averted. All thanks to the token bottom bracket adapter, I think they call that, and the special tool. Now, all told, we're in for just over 80 quid for a bottom bracket change. A lot of money. Some bottom brackets can cost you 80 quid, but in terms of it being 80 quid to save the frame, yeah, absolutely, that was money well spent. And think of it in terms of other components that you'd just place during the course of normal business. Cassette, 80 quid. Your chain rings, probably over 100 if you bought a decent set. You know, you could even be in for 80 quid on a chain, depending on which one you buy. 80 quid. What's that? A couple of brake pad changes. So, you know, to me, that's 80 quid well spent. And definitely this token adapter is something that for me has saved this frame. And as I mentioned in the previous video, I'm quite emotionally invested in this bike, so that to me is money well spent. Now you might say to yourself, 30 quid on a tool I'm only going to use once. Well, yeah, so what? It's just par for the course. I'm not being funny. I bet you if you put that on eBay after you've used it, you'll get 20 quid for it. There'll be somebody out there that will want to buy one of these to install their own token bottom bracket adapter. I'm just going to stick it in the toolbox because there's every likelihood that I might want to take that bottom bracket out there one day. So anyway, there it is. Crisis averted, frame saved, bike saved. Going to get the first ride in on this new bottom bracket tomorrow, but as I demonstrated in the video, it's absolutely rock solid. In fact, I don't recall the bottom bracket feeling that rigid even since the bike was new. So there you go. If you got this far into this, you have, as always, my respect and admiration. Next video coming out is back to a bit of health and fitness stuff. I'm going to start talking about how I'm using Zwift to continue stripping off the kilos. 28 kilos down at the moment, so that can't be bad, can it? Yeah, anyway, look out for that one. As always, if you watched any of this, thanks very much. And if you've got a Trek with a BB90, BB95, don't worry, all is not lost.